One more second. One more second. One more second. One more second. Get going. One more second. One more second. One more second. One more second. All right. Okay. I think we're good now. So, you know, the so as we said, the key here is to get the information to the frontal lobe. All right. That's what we're most concerned with is getting information to the frontal lobe. All right. It'd be great if all students were intrinsically motivated and we didn't have to do a lot in that regard, but that's just not the case. That's just simply not the case. Um, and that would be easy. That would be an easy deal if we were able just to walk in a classroom and students were all intrinsically motivated. Everything goes right to the frontal lobe, and we're champions. It doesn't work that way. All students are not going to be intrinsically motivated. Uh, so some of the things that we have to do is, or everything that we have to do in every lesson, and we got to do this every lesson, is think about the students' brains or the students' brains. All right. There are three parts of the brain. Now, you don't need to be a neuroscientist. Okay. You do not need to be a neuroscientist, but you do need to consider three parts of the brain. Okay. The first part is the reticular activating system. You see where it says RAS, the reticular activating system. Okay. Your reticular activating system, you have one, I have one, everyone has one. Its primary job and responsibility is to protect you. You see that it's near the brain stem. You see that it's located in the brain stem. The brain stem stores all your ancestors' fears, everything that your ancestors have learned throughout the ages. So our instincts is stored there, right? Our fight, flight, or freeze response is stored there, right? The reticular activating system. So that's your brain's security guard. It's there to protect you. When someone's acting aggressively, it's your reticular activating system, your RAS, that's there to protect you, that tells your brain that you should run, that you should fight, that you should freeze. Okay. And anytime that we receive information, it first goes through the RAS. Just like when you walk into a building, there's the security guard right there, right? Can I, why are you here? Can I see some ID? Are you here as a threat? Are you here to harm me? Are you here to harm us? Right? That's what your RAS does. All right. And if the RAS determines that the information, the inputs that are being presented is a threat, it goes into the non-thinking part of the brain. And then that's when we fight. It's called the fight, or freeze response. Fight, flight, or freeze. You either fight a person, right? You either run away. Flight is running away. Freeze is when you just do nothing, right? Um, God has made it that some animals freeze is a great response. Other animals fighting is a great response. Other animals flight is a great response. More sophisticated animals can do all three. Like humans, we could do all three based on the situation, right? So if a learner decides that the information is dangerous, it's going to hurt them in some way, then you're going to have a classroom management issue. They're going to talk in class. They're going to ask to go to the bathroom. They're going to argue with you, be smart, catch an attitude, right? All the things that we see kids do, learners do, even adults. Get on their phone. So getting on their phone would be what do you think that would be? Fight, flight, or freeze? Getting on the phone. You think that's fight, flight, or freeze?
They might freeze.
It could be freeze.
Just
It could be a freeze. It
yes.
could be, depending on the situation, it could be a freeze response or it could be a fight response, depending. So if the student is doing it knowing it's going to agitate you, right? If the student is doing it knowing that getting on the phone will agitate you, that's a fight response. If they get on the phone because they just want to check out, right? They just want to check out the lesson, that could be a freeze response or it could be a flight response. So learners can use it as all three response. What about when a learner starts talking in class, talking to other students in class? Is that fight, flight, or freeze?
Fight, flight.
When they start talking in class, that's going to be a fight response. They're fighting with you, right?
Yes.
Right? They're not following your rules. What about continuously asking to go to the bathroom or asking to leave the class? Which one was that? Fight, flight, or freeze?
Uh, Flight, I think.
Flight. Right. They want to get out of the building. They want to get out of the
Yes.
classroom. All right. So this happens when learners are not are fear that the information is a threat to them. Okay. Now, let's say the teacher does a good job, or the learners determine that the information is not a threat. The next place it goes is to the amygdala. You see there, it's the red ball. See that red ball? That's the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is a wild part of the brain. And the amygdala is concerned with one thing and one thing only. And that is, what is in it for me? What is in it for me? That's what the amygdala is concerned with. What is in it for me? If there's nothing, if I'm not getting some type of benefit out of this, then I'm not interested, right? And so if we as educators don't communicate the value that the information that we're presenting has to the learner, then what would happen? It will then, the brain will then, or the amygdala will send it to the non-thinking part of the brain. And again, you will have another fight, flight, or freeze response. All right. Now, if we're able to uh, establish with the learners that this information has value and it's not threatening, and it has value, then the information will then push it to the frontal lobe. All right. Okay. That's easier said than done. All right. And as we said earlier, when the information is in the frontal lobe, gets put in the frontal lobe, then the students now have determined that this has some meaning, is relative to them. They can see how this will help them, how this will improve their life or be beneficial to them in some way. Okay. So as an educator, the three parts of the brain that we need to be mindful of is the reticular activating system, the amygdala, and the frontal lobe. Okay. Now, it's easier said than done. right? Because some learners are coming in to your class already terrified. I'll give you an example. When I was in college, when I was in undergrad, I was terrified of math. Terrified. There's nothing you can say. I was terrified. I needed the teacher to take me by the hand and say, Ray, it's going to be okay. I'm going to help you do this. We're going to get through it together. If you have any concerns, any problems, I'm here. Raise your hand. Ray, you need to know this stuff because it's going to help you become a better thinker. It's going to help you in your life. It's going to help you. It's going to help you analyze things. It's going to help you evaluate things in your life. Right? It's math is not just math. Right? Math also is logic. I needed to hear that. But guess what? The teacher didn't know I was fearful of math. Why? Because the teacher, what do we normally do as teachers? We normally focus on who? The smarter kids, don't we?
Yeah.
We normally focus on the smarter kids or the kids that are causing a problem. Those two. Because the smarter kids are always raising their hands. I know the answer. I know the answer. Let me tell you the answer. Right? Or the kids are always causing a problem. What they're doing, they're drawing our attention. So we're focusing on them. Sit down. Sit down. Be quiet. Not right now. Later on. But that's not most of the kids. Most of the kids are just sitting there like this. And they have fears, they have concerns, they're not quite sure, they're uncomfortable. You get what I'm saying? And they get totally forgotten about because the teachers is concerned with the student who always wants to help, always wants to answer the question, always want to get attention, or the other student who's just acting a clown, being obnoxious, being rude. So the kids in the middle are like, what's going on? This is another reason why we have to spend, again, at least 2 weeks to 4 weeks getting to know the students, knowing that Sarah is doesn't like history or fearful of history, knowing that Ray hates math. So when those times come, you can say, hey, Ray, I know you don't like math. But you know what? We're going to get through this together. I have created this worksheet for you that made it a little bit more easier for you. And I'm going to give you a little bit more time. Right? And here's a little bit more help. Right? Do we do that? No. And that doesn't mean that because we're bad people. Even me, I know. I've been doing this for 25 years. I know. And sometimes I forget about the middle kids. Sometimes I focus on the kids who are just the smart kids or the kids who are causing the issue. Now I do my best, but sometimes I forget I'm a human being. Right? And then I go back and I say, oh man, I didn't the kids who didn't say anything, I really didn't focus on them today. And the problem is the more and more you don't focus on, get them involved, ask them questions, learn about them, the deeper their resentment or their fear is. So now, if you wait until November, if you wait until December, if you wait until January to say something, and months have gone by, and now you want to do an intervention, it's too late because
Late.
now their RES
But
is
yes, I want to say something because I
yeah.
think in my teaching experience, I've um, I've done it differently with those type of kids.
How did you do it?
because most of the kids I target mostly in class. The last 2 academic years, I've been teaching KG3, and most of them who comes to school so fresh, they have never been to school before, they don't know anything. And you find some of them, this is their first time in school, but at least you can see at home they had a little bit of knowledge or idea of what they're going to meet. So my attention mostly goes, I do not isolate the smart ones or the talkative ones, and I don't give too much attention to hyperactive or active students who distract the class. Because the more I give them that attention, the more they keep on distracting the class.
Hmm.
Like you said yesterday, sometimes I let them just do what they want, but I give them a time. They have a time limit. Like if you stand up 2 times, the third time you will choose time out, or you will not get a reward by the end of the day. So those kids who are a little bit dull, they don't want to speak up, they are so scared. I involve them in so much activities to make them feel involved, feel more like they have my attention. So that's what I do for them, and I've seen how effective that has worked, and it has motivated them to be more open. If they have any issue or they need any help, they will come to me direct and ask anything they need. So I don't know if that's how I'm supposed to do it, but that's how I do it, helping them.
Remember what we said yesterday. There's no how you're supposed to do it, not how you not supposed to do it, right?
Yeah.
What I, what it sounds like is you're doing it the right way because,
Okay.
um, especially at it sounds like what the way you're doing is the best practice. Ignoring the kids who are just doing it for attention, focus on the kids who are not being activated. That's a great strategy. Is it the only strategy? No, but it's a
No,
great
it's not.
strategy. And if
Yes.
it's working for you, if it's working for you for those students at that time, then great. If it's not working, then we what we say yesterday, we find another method. But
Yeah, exactly.
if you find that it's working, go with it and don't let anyone tell you any otherwise. If it's not working, then you find another method, right? And we're going to find that you'll see that some methods are more effective than other methods, but you also learn that there's no method that's 100% perfect, right? So, um, so yeah, that seems right about right. Um, Kindergarten, the early years, the science is a little bit different because their brains are different than maybe a fourth grader and a fifth grader, right? Or even an adult. Um, and when I say different, that doesn't mean it's easier. It's actually quite harder with kindergarten because
Very,
their
very.
brains are not as developed. Um,
Yes.
so kindergarten, I always say that kindergarten teachers are the best teachers because they're dealing with a, a brain that is still in the early stages and hasn't really formed yet, and they don't have that level of independence, right?
Yeah,
So, you know,
because I've seen teachers who quit in the in the middle of the class. They just give up and leave.
everyone is not designed for kindergarten. Everyone is not designed. It takes a specific type of person to teach kindergarten effectively. It's not for everyone, right? It's not
It's
for
true.
everyone. Because there are different dynamics involved when you're talking about younger kids. Uh, totally different dynamics. Um, can you give me 1 second? Give me like 2 minutes. I need to do one thing. Okay, give me 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Um, so again, as educators, we got to keep that in mind. We got to keep the brain in mind, and this goes from uh, even with adults. Even when you're teaching adults, you have to more so when you're teaching adults, because their RAS is going to be way more. They're way kids are children tend to be way more forgiving than adults. Right? The kids will forget things easier. Right? You can yell at a child, and you can yell at a child, "Sit down, be quiet," and they'll get over it. Right? If you yell at an adult, an adult they're gonna remember it 5, 10 years. So she yelled at me, right? So it's more important. It's very important with adults that you do this. Even with kids, everyone. But keep in mind that adults are going to be way more. Their RAS is going to be way more stronger, way more firm. They're very adults. We are setting our ways, so it's tricky to teach adults. So keep in mind that RAS, the reticular activating system, the amygdala, and the frontal lobe. Our job as educators is to get the information to the frontal lobe with the understanding that all information is not going to get to the frontal lobe, and everything you teach doesn't have to get to the frontal lobe. All right. So every unit you teach, every input you give does not have to get to the frontal lobe, but may have to get to working memory. So let's talk about memory for a second. Okay. There are three types of memories that we as educators need to focus on. And I'll go to the whiteboard now. And the three types of memories that we need to focus on. Or Sada. All right. Three types of memories that we have, that us humans have. Do you know them?
So,
So we have our short-term memory.
mhm.
Right? Our short-term memory. This is uh, things that we keep them maybe for a day, maybe for a couple minutes. It depends on what it is. Maybe it's a code, right? You got to remember your OTP code for something, or maybe you got to remember a bit of information for a day. It's just not. It's just stored in a short term. It only has short term value, and if we forget it, it's not a big deal. That's our short term memory, right? And we kind of just throw it away. Once we use it, we throw it away, right? So
Yeah,
if I told you to dial this number, right, and then after you dial that number, you don't really need to know the number after you dial it, right? That's our short term memory, right? Yeah. How much is it? Yeah, that's probably what it is now. Yeah, yeah, that's what I told you. You can't pick it up anymore. So short term memory, your short term memory is the memory that I'll say less than 24 hours, 20, 48 hours tops, right? You do it for a particular, somebody says, you're at the airport, go to um, section A12, right? And then once you go to section A12 and you're there and you get on a plane and somebody asks you a week later, well, what section were you at? You're probably not going to remember that it was A12. Maybe you will, depending on, but maybe you do. If you got a good memory, maybe you don't. If something happened that forces you to put it in your working memory, Maybe you got into an argument with the counter agent, and now you're gonna write a complaint. So now A12 sticks in your mind. That's what we call our working memory. Okay. Now, a working memory is when you need to do a particular thing or know or remember a particular thing over a duration of time. Maybe it's for work, maybe it's for whatever. That's your working memory. All right. This could go a months, it can go a year, depending on if you're engaging that thing. That's your working memory. All right. But the key with working memory is that you're always engaged in that thing. Right. So for instance, you get into an argument with the counter agent at the airport, right? And that agent was at section A12 or booth A12, right? Now you're going to remember A12 for a long time because let's say you're going to write a complaint letter, a complaint email. You're going to call the airlines, right? You got to do a follow up. And all these things may take over a month, right? To follow up, call back, emails. This lady was rude to me. She cursed me. I want a refund. I want to speak to the manager. You're going to remember A12 because now it's in your working memory. Until the situation is resolved, you're going to remember A12. Make sense? That's your
Yes.
working memory. All right. And then once the issue is resolved, maybe a week later, a couple of days later, you forget A12. Well, what was that? Oh, I can't remember what that. Now, when it was in your working memory, you could pull it all for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, because it was in your working memory, because you was using it, the issue wasn't resolved. Make sense? So in the context of teaching, when we teach a student something, sometimes it goes to their short-term memory, and students will organize this accordingly based on whether it's a quiz, whether it's going to be on the midterm, whether they need to know it at all, right? So if you just want them to know it just for their class, it's going to be in their short-term memory. If you tell them that it's going to be on a quiz in the midterm, right, and then on a final exam, it's going to be in their what? Their working memory.
One.
In their working memory, because they say, "Oh, I got to
Yes.
remember I got to remember it for the quiz. I have to remember it for the midterm, and I have to remember it for the final." But what happens 2 days after the final, right? They're probably going to forget it, right? They're going to after the
Absolutely.
final exam, their brains is going to automatically dump it out. And then you have long-term memory. All right. Your long-term memory, you never forget. It may take some recalling or something to spark it. But this one book I read, the author said that you put it in your closet. You put it in your brain closet and it's stored there, right? So like a wedding dress, right? You may have only wore it one day, but you put that wedding dress in plastic, right? And you never forget that wedding dress, right? A year later, 5 years later, you always remember that dress because you put it in you wore it only one time, but you remember that dress for the rest of your life because you decided to put that dress in your long-term memory, in your closet. And when you have a memory of that day or dresses or whatever that sparks that memory, you can now tell every detail about the dress, right? If somebody tried to exchange the dress with a dress that looks similar, you like, 20 years later, you're like, no, 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 that's not my dress. No, 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 no. I know my dress. You only wore
Mm.
it one time. You only wore it one time, right? Because you chose to put it in your long-term memory. What does that tell us? That tells us that we are our own teachers. That we decide what goes in the long-term memory and what doesn't. Now, something like a wedding dress, that is a monumental moment in many people's lives. I don't know about nowadays, but nowadays, people get so married so much now. But for you know, but for some people, even now, that's a memory that they will store in their long-term memory and they won't forget. Okay, they won't even when they have suffer from things like dementia, they can still remember that wedding dress. They can still pull that memory, right? Even with things like dementia and Alzheimer's. Whereas in your working memory, you could remember as long as you used it, you could rattle it off. But once you stop using it, it's done. You forget about it. Short-term memory are things that we just need to know for a very short time, a day or less, maybe 2 days. All right. If, right? And the older we get, the shorter that short-term memory tends to last, unless you have an impeccable memory. All right. Now, as educators, we need to know this. We need to realize that we cannot request that every bit of information that we give a learner is going to go into their long-term memory. That's just not realistic. Everything is not that important. Everything is not a wedding dress. It's not.
Yeah.
And we have to, so we have to understand that and know that. So then if everything is not excuse me, if everything is not a wedding dress, think about this for a second. If everything is not a wedding dress, then how much value are we putting in the information that we give in learners? Right? So that means we need to be very discriminatory on and discriminate on what we present to learners as important. You cannot tell a learner that everything that you present to them is important, because what happens is nothing becomes important or nothing becomes essential, right? In fact, that's a good point. There's a difference between important and essential. There's a difference between important is overused. People overuse and incorrectly use the word important. Because important, remember we talked about qualitative and quantitative yesterday? Remember those two words? Well,
Yeah.
important is qualitative. Important is qualitative. All right. It might be important to me, but not to you.
Yeah.
That's a qualitative thing. All right. Whereas essential is something that's more quantitative. Essential is something that is required. Now, if you tell a student that everything is so what's important to you is not important to your students. Remember, that's number one. So do your best to remove the word important from your ideology as a teacher, because it's important. It's only important to you. It's not important to them. What we are concerned with is essential, right? Things that are essential to our learners. The learners can decide what's important to them, and then they can decide whether they want to put important things in their long-term memory. All we need to do is give them the opportunity to explore that through what we talked yesterday about in Bloom's taxonomy. Through what? Remembering and understanding and applying and analyzing and synthesizing and evaluating, right? We do those things and we move up Bloom's, up that hierarchy, up that pyramid, then they will determine what's important, what transactions are important. However, there are some things that are essential that we have to tell our students, hey, look, this is essential. And that means these are themes that we repeat throughout the school year. And not only throughout the school year, but throughout the learner's complete comprehensive education from kindergarten to grade 12 to when they even go to college to when they go into postgraduate, right? If they go into postgraduate, but at least from KG all the way to the 12th grade, we emphasize essential uh, information, right? What are those things? Communication, right? Being able to communicate oneself properly, whether it's verbally or non-verbally, writing, right? From KG all the way to 12th grade, teachers should be asking you to write, right? Because writing is what? Connected to what? Thinking. Good writing is good thinking. Good writing is nothing more than the product of good thinking. So we ask students to write all the time from KG to 12 because that's good thinking. That's an essential skill that the person, the human being needs to understand that they always need to work on that. KG to 12, college, master's program, postgraduate, graduate, postgraduate, right? All right. Some math, being able to do arithmetic. Now, you might not need algebra all your life. You may not need geometry and trigonometry and calculus, but you daggone sure need that what? That arithmetic. You need to know how to add. That's essential to your daily life. You need to know how to divide and subtract. These things are essential to your daily life, right? You need to know fractions. Fractions are essential. Decimals are essential. Percentages are essential to your daily life. And you're in the store and it says 20% off. How much is it off? You should be able to calculate that. These things are essential. But and they're normally broader things. Okay? And we emphasize those concepts from grades KG all the way to 12. Everything else is not essential. It may be important to you, but it's not essential. Everything else are just opportunities for the learners to relate themselves to that opportunity, to that life, so they can develop and be a stronger person, the best person they could be. Learning about Shakespeare, right? Reading Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, right? And, uh, Julius Caesar, right? Othello, reading all these Shakespeare plays. It's not essential. You can go through your life and not have read one Shakespeare play. Go through your whole life. But reading Shakespeare, will that make you more cultured? Yes. but it's not essential. And we can argue about whether it's important or not, yada yada, but it's not essential. Will it help you be more cultured, and and understand the world better? Yes. And that's why we teach Shakespeare. That's why we read books. That's why we learn science, right? Some things in science are essential and others are not, right? We need to let young people know at a very young age that life needs oxygen. That's essential, right? Young people need to know that life life forms need water. They need to know that's an essential concept that every human being needs to know, right? Because if you're going to be a mommy or a daddy one day, you need to know that your baby needs air, right? And your
Yeah.
baby needs food and energy and water, liquids, because this is a part of the human experience. These are things are essential. All right. So when we're talking about what we teach students, we have to divide the essential from the important. Okay. That essential and important there are two different words. Essential is subjective. Excuse me, important is subjective. What's important to me may not be important to you. However, things that are essential, they tend to be uh, uh, universal. We all need water. We all need food. We all need shelter. Right? So things that we will find in what Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Do you know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
No.
All right, let's look at that for a second, because again, this concept is important to teaching and learning. So create. I'm just being lazy now. Create a diagram image of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All right. So I'm going to show you Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Because again, when we talk about the brain, these points are essential because at the end of the day, you have to remember we are in the business of human services. This is a human service. These are people that we are teaching. So we don't understand the wants, needs, and expectations of people, and we're not applying best practices in that regard, then we're not doing a good job as educators, because this is a people's job. Okay, let's see something here. Share. So I could have just downloaded a regular picture. So, oh, why it's taking so long? I could have just downloaded. Okay. Do you see the Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Do you see it? All right. So this is from Abraham Maslow, and he came up with this in the earlier 20th century. All right. So every teacher, just like Bloom's taxonomy, every teacher needs to remember these things when we are teaching or when we are engaging learners. The bottom of the pyramid here is physiological needs. If a learner's physiological needs are not met, then guess what happens? That RES is unhappy. You cannot teach a starving child. You cannot engage academically in somebody who's starving for food, starving for love, starving for water, starving for money, right? So this is why we see in low income and poor and countries and areas that suffer from poverty, there's normally a direct correlation between poverty and what? Education, right?
Yeah.
Because if somebody's hungry, they're not worried about Shakespeare, and they're not worried about fractions, and they want to eat. If someone is thirsty, they're not worried about the periodic table. They want to eat. They want to drink. If somebody's emotionally disturbed and their emotional needs are not met, you can't teach them about Napoleon or World War II. They have to deal with their emotional issues because their mind is nowhere near getting anything to that frontal lobe. So that's why sometimes we say as teachers, we're more than teachers. We're psychologists, sociologists, social workers, mommy, daddies, because in order to get them prepared to make this RES satisfied, we got to get them the environment where they can be ready to learn. So before you teach anyone anything or attempt to help them teach themselves, you got to feed them. You got to make sure they're thirsty. You got to make sure they're not hungry. You got to make sure they're in the right emotional framework, mindset. You got to make sure they're not hot. You got to make sure you got air conditioning. Then they're not cold. They got heating. So educators, we need to make sure that their learners' physiological needs are met, that they have food, water, shelter, that they're not sleepy. Can you teach someone who's sleepy, who's tired? No, they're going to check out. Okay. After that, we got to make sure that they're safe, that there's emotional security there, that there's safety there. All right. That's why teachers should be kind. Teachers teachers should be nice. And that doesn't mean you have to give students what they want and be a pushover, but it does mean you should be smiling, that you should do your best to help the learner as much as possible and not be a dictator in the classroom. Be someone that the student can come to and talk to. That doesn't mean you don't have to keep a standard, or if you catch a student doing something wrong, you turn a blind eye. No, you can have law, order, justice in your classroom and still be kind, still be nice, right? Because if you don't have law and order, that could have the opposite effect of safety too. So you gotta have law and order. You gotta make sure students are following the rules. You gotta have structure, but you gotta be kind. Students need to know that you're there for their benefit. If they don't feel that, you think that RES is going to be happy? That RES is not going to be happy. All right. After that, then love and belonging, and we could do that um, in our classrooms. All right. There's a there's many different types of beliefs when it comes to teaching and learning, and most people, well, a lot of people want to call themselves constructivists, social constructivism. It's called social constructivism. Some people are behaviorists, and I'm not going to get into all that because it's not a education class. But um, ultimately, in the classroom or learning situations, are about human interactions. Remember, we talked about yesterday that you're going to have some people in your class because they're motivated integratively. Remember that? They want to be around people. Their sole motivation to learn is so they can have discourse with people. Think about why do people drink alcohol? Why do people go to the bar? Because they enjoy alcohol? No. Most people go to the bar and drink because they what we call social drinkers. They want to be around other people. So any opportunity, same thing with coffee. You go to the Dunkin' Donuts early in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and you see old people in there, what? Drinking coffee, talking. Even if they're not talking, they want to be around other people. That's a human need. No one's a true no one's a true introvert. All humans, we're social beings. Even though we might not want to be around people, we want to be around people. We just don't want the people to talk to us and bother us. But we need to know that people are around. Because we're human. No one's a true introvert. No one's a true introvert. Every last one of us enjoy the company of others. It's just in various degrees. Some people go through the extreme, and some people in the extreme where they always got to be around people. They got to be the life of the party. They got to have people affirm who they are. And some of us don't need that, but we still need to be around one another because we're social beings. That's how God made us. So we want to belong. We want to be loved, right? And then after that, this is a higher level. It's called esteem, where people want prestige and feeling accomplished. And a lot of times they get that prestige through education, through school, right? You get that prestige, right? You get that prestige, right? You get that prestige. You get a piece of paper, right? Look at this big piece of paper I got. Cost me about $30,000 for this piece of paper, right? $30,000 just so I could say what? Doctor of philosophy.
30,000. 30,000.
$80,000 for this piece of paper.
Oh my
Right?
God.
Just so I
So
can get a
much.
piece of paper. Dollars, not even reals, dollars. Right? Just
Oh
so I
my
get a
God.
piece of paper that says doctor on it. Doctor of philosophy. Ooh, prestigious. Because that's esteem. People want that steam. Call me Dr. Ray. The feeling of accomplishment, right? The feeling of accomplishment. We all want to be accomplished. My certificates, right? Accomplishments, awards, trophies. We all want that. We want to be recognized. So as educators, we got to keep that in mind. That's why as kindergarten, what you get the stickers out. You get a
Yeah.
gold star. You get a gold star. You get a happy face, and the kids go what nuts. And I'm gonna tell you, I teach adults, and sometimes in my classes, I give them gold stickers, happy faces, 40, 50-year-old men and women. And do you know they will fight over the stickers? No, no, no,
True.
I want a sticker. Oh, give me that sticker. That sticker. Because we all want esteem, right? We got to get the Louis Vuitton, the Gucci, drive a nice car, yada, yada, yada. You see people post on it. I went to this restaurant in Riyadh and look at my food. And right. So as educators, we could use that to our advantage, right? We can use that to our advantage. And that's why we need to know students' wants, needs, and expectations to figure out what motivates them. What type of esteem are they concerned with? Because everyone wants esteem. Some people are low key with it, and some people are very loud with it. But don't ever let somebody tell you that they don't want esteem. Oh, I'm not really into that.
No.
Nah, that's something everybody's into something. Some people are again a little bit quiet with their esteem, but and other people are very boisterous with it. But we all want esteem because we're human beings. And then finally, the highest level is self-actualization. Now, self-actualization is when you um, you now understand that esteem is not that important, and that you're really there for the common good of society. That you've gotten over that phase where you need to drive the fancy car and have the expensive pocketbook. You've gotten over that phase. All right. And normally this is when you're much older. But some people can get it when they're younger. And they're more concerned um, with being efficient, with society being efficient, right? So that when you hear about wealthy people who give all their money away, they have reached the level of self-actualization. Now I'm going to tell you, so this is what we want from our learners. This is ultimately what we want from our learners. We won't ever see it, but we're trying. We are a part of that journey to hopefully one day, hopefully one day they become self-actualized, where they are more concerned with the greater good of society and humanity than themselves. And that's our value. So when we talk about, so yesterday we talked about developing the person. Well, that's what I mean by developing the person, is that we hope that one day we can get as many people to become self-actualized as possible. Because when that day comes, then we'll have a truly perfect society. But the problem is that most people don't even get beyond love and belonging. Some of us struggle with our physiological needs, right? There are people in the world that are struggling for water, food, warmth, rest. There's some people who are struggling for security and safety, the Palestinians, right? Some people who are looking for love because they didn't have a mother that loved them. They didn't have a father that truly loved them, right? They can't establish real relationships. They get married and they get divorced. They get married. They can't hold on to true friendships, right? Some people get the good job, right? And their whole life is about wearing Rolexes and and doing this and doing that to impress other people, right? Right? And people get stuck there. And there are very few people who reach the level of self actualization because most of us get stuck in this in safety and love and belonging. And if we can get and if we get out of esteem, we still get if we get to the level where we experience esteem, we're still stuck in love and belonging, right? Because you have esteem, and that steam, when you experience esteem, brings you down because you're not loving people or you're not being loved. So most of us get stuck in safety, love and belonging, esteem. The most unfortunate of us don't even get off the first tier because every day is a struggle for food. Every day is a struggle for water. Every day is a struggle for warmth, for shelter, for sleep. So our job as educators is to help people be able to get their own food, be self-sustaining, get their own clean water, provide their own shelter, understand how to take care of themselves, understand how to provide safety for themselves, security for themselves, understand relationships, understand how to manage wealth and pride to get to that level of self-actualization. You know, this this is the business of a teacher, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Unfortunately, most schools in the throughout some schools understand this, but most schools don't because we see school as what? A way to build esteem. If you go to school and you do what you're going to get a good job and you'll be able to buy a house. You'll be able to do these things. You'll be able to buy a car. And we tell learners the wrong thing about why we are here and why they are here. We don't tell learners that they're here to become the greatest individuals they possibly can be so they can provide to the common good of society. We don't tell learners that. No, we say, well, if you go to school, you get good grades, you go to a good you go to a good university, and you have a beautiful wife, right? You have 2 kids and 3 kids and this nice home and fly around the world and make people jealous. That's what we tell people. But that's not the business of teaching and learning. That's why yesterday I wanted to make sure I differentiated an instructor from a teacher. Most people that you meet, they're just instructors. They want to teach a student something, and everything that they teach is essential. It's because I'm instructing you, so it's essential. But teachers, we discriminate between what is essential and what is important. Understanding that most of the things that we are presenting to learners are important and not essential. And therefore, we don't have to stress so much about it. Therefore, we can keep our eyes on a prize and focus on them becoming the best person they can be. And they don't need to be the best at math. They don't need to be the best at writing. They don't need to be the best at reading. But we can make them the best person they can be by making sure that they become self-determined, self-regulated, and self-efficient. Because once they do that, then they will be fine without knowing Shakespeare, without knowing who Leonardo da Vinci was, Okay, they'll be fine. Right. One of the biggest issues that I have with schools is that we put too much emphasis on testing. Do you know that most tests that we give throughout the world are invalid? There's something called validity and man, validity and oh man, having a brain cramp. Um,
Hmm.
not not frequency. Validity in oh man, why am I having a brain cramp? Someone help me. Um, not consistency. I don't know why I'm having a brain cramp. But there's two elements for a test, and most tests that we give is neither is are invalid in. Oh, Ray, come on, think. My short term, my working memory is not working. Um,
Take your
validity,
time.
validity, and not frequency. Validity. Oh, reliability. Thank you. Validity and reliability. So most tests that we give are neither valid or reliable. Valid meaning that what we're actually testing for is being measured in the assessment, and reliability meaning that if we was to give that test throughout a certain time period, that the students will score pretty much the same on the test. So even tests like IELTS, IELTS and TOEFL and all these tests, IELTS especially has low validity and reliability, right? Um, and they design it that way. The reason why it has low validity and reliability is because of the way they alter the test to make money off the test. Because they don't want you to master the test. So they alter the test in ways that you it's very rare for people to jump a band. So if you score 4.5 on it, right? If you took the test 3 months later, the highest that you're probably going to score is a 5 because of the way they designed the test. And that, unless you totally just didn't really try hard the first time, you might score 5.5. But you'll never see somebody score from a 4.5 to a 6. Never. Never. I mean, unless they took years and years and years and then they came back and took the test. All right. But my point is that what do we focus most on in school? Testing. We test, 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 test. Every time I turn around, kids are taking the test. Test midterms, quizzes, tests, unit tests, final exam. They take exams in elementary school. Testing is not teaching. Furthermore, you know why we give students tests? Do you know why we give students tests?
Mhm.
We're supposed to give students tests for as data, because remember, 90% of what we do is what? Plan. So tests are supposed to be data to help us plan. But we don't use it for that, do we? We use tests to tell parents and students how smart they are and how dumb they are. Because if you fail a test, you feel what? Dumb. That's not the purpose of a test. Tests tests do more harm than they ever did good. Because that poor kid who may have taken the test, or a poor person who may have taken the test that in the first place was neither valid or reliable, gets an F or a D on a test, And then what happens? The head goes down, the shoulders go, and they're just deflated. They're just deflated. So what happens? What happens now to the RES? What happens to that RES? You think you're gonna do anything for that RES after you just gave them an F after they just received an F on one test? It's gonna be hard to teach that kid now, right? Because then the kid are, especially if the kid already, or when I say kid, the learner, whether a child or even an adult, especially if they already felt uncomfortable with the subject, they already knew they were weak in math, and then the first test they get an F. What are you gonna do for what happens? If it was up to me, I would never give students their test scores. If it was up to me, you know what every test would look like? What every assessment would be? Tell me what you learned in the course. Tell me what you learned in this unit. That's all I need to know. Tell me what you learned and how might it help you in the future. That's all I need to know. Because I know people who graduated top of their class and turned out to be to not be that great in life. Let's put it that way. And I know people who were D students, C students, and are thriving as adults, thriving legally. So we know for a fact that just because you're an A student doesn't mean you're going to be successful in life. And we know for a fact just because you're a C student doesn't mean, or a D student doesn't mean you're not going to be successful. So why are we giving tests? All right, just something to think about. All right, it's 12:53 now. I think I covered what I wanted to cover. We went over the brain, how information gets to the frontal lobe. Keep in mind that the frontal lobe is our job. Our job is to help students get that information to the frontal lobe so it becomes a part of their long-term memory, because that means it now relates to some part of their life and they can use that information to solve problems. The only reason why we present information to learners is so they could possibly use it to solve a problem that they have currently or will have in the future. Our job is to predict what problems they might have in the future and help prepare for those problems using both essential and important information. Essential information is information that we continuously give them from KG to 12 and even beyond. All right. Important information are just the little opportunities we give them, exchanges we give them via lessons, via instruction, where they understand that they might want to put this information in their long-term memory, with the understanding that a lot of times they're going to decide, nope, this is only for the test. This is only for my working memory. Nope, this is only for my short-term memory. Okay. And let them, why? Because they are their own teachers. So that's why, again, we must take that time, or there has to be a time where we get to know the students, figure out what their wants, needs, and expectations are, and then do an academic plan that will meet their wants, needs, and expectations. Do you have any questions for me based on what we talked about today?
No.
All right. Today, tomorrow we will go over lesson planning. I think I sent you a lesson plan in the Google Classroom, but we'll talk specifically about lesson planning tomorrow, how to write an effective lesson plan, but in conjunction with that yearly plan that we talked about in a unit plan. So tomorrow We're going to talk about planning. In fact, we're going to talk a lot about planning over the next couple of weeks because what did we say? 90% of what we do is planning. So I would be remiss to not spend a lot of time talking about planning. If you don't have anything else, we'll see tomorrow. Remember, do your journal. Read the
Uh,
next.
and the and the reading about the smooth moves.
Mhm.
You say I should read the first 20 pages and write 4
What?
pages and 8.
No, one page, just one page. So one page from yesterday, and then one page from today. So you're gonna read. You're gonna read the pages, the 25 pages. Tell me what you learned, and tell me the two questions that's on the journal page. What you learned, and how would you use that in your teaching? That's the two questions. That's always the
From
two
the book.
questions
From the
from the book.
book.
From the book and the conversation. So from the book and the lesson, today's talk.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And then you can also have questions for me if you have any questions from anything from the book.
Okay. If I have anything, I will send it.
Yep. So the way we'll do this is I'll always start off with asking you if you have any questions or you have any feedback, or if you don't, I will ask you what have you learned, and then you can basically read from your journal.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Did you learn something today?
A lot.
All right. So we'll see you tomorrow at 11. Okay.
No, no problem. Thank you.
All right. See you. Oh, were you able to make the deposit?
I will do it right now because I was waiting for the updates because after I got the transfer,
No
I
problem.
had to open it. Yes, I will deposit it now.
Take your time.